I was exposed to amazing architecture at a very young age and didn't realize the effect it had on me until I started selling real estate.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Smart Agents Podcast. My name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. With each episode, our goal is to inspire you through the insight and inspirational stories from fellow real estate professionals. Now, before we get into today's featured episode, make sure you follow and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. You can find it on everything from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we are there. Also, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Click the bell to get notifications for each time a new episode is uploaded. And lastly, if you or someone on your team has an awesome story to share, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new stories to feature. In today's episode, we chat with Kate Adams. She's based in Pasadena, California, and she has a passion for architecture, and it really came through during our conversation. Not only does she love the nuance of listing these historic properties, but she's also very passionate about what she thinks could be the future of home construction. You know, just to get started out a little bit, could you tell me about where you're at in the country and how long you've been in real estate?
Sure. I am in Pasadena, California. So I'm in Los Angeles area. I cover most of the Los Angeles County area. And I have been licensed since 2001. I started in Mammoth Lakes, California, and I moved to Oregon for 5 years. So I've been in a number of different markets, different environments, different price points. So I've been doing it a long time. Right.
And I was really interested to see that you said you are the architectural homes.
Yes.
And historic and modern is kind of your thing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, growing up in Pasadena, the Rose Parade is here every year, and we are blessed to have a multitude of architectural styles throughout the city, as well as in most of Los Angeles. But in Pasadena, we have the oldest historic district in the country, Bungalow Heaven. Mm-hmm. So, and one of the largest as well. And I grew up, with friends that lived in a Green and Green, a Wallace Neff, Marston Van Pelt, Buff and Hensman. So I was exposed to amazing architecture at a very young age and didn't realize the effect it had on me until I started selling real estate.
Yeah. So now that you are selling real estate, I'd imagine homes of that kind of significance take on a much different life when you're either listing them or you're trying to find a buyer for them. Kind of walk me through that a little bit?
Well, again, being in Los Angeles, we have, I think we have the most interesting array of architecture really than anywhere else in the country, aside from maybe New York, or New Orleans. It's another amazing architectural place. But you have a lot of buyers here. You have a lot of people who want to live in a Frank Lloyd Wright or a Buff and Hensman. We have a lot of mid-century here, pretty much all over the LA basin. And that's something a lot of young families are very interested in living in, mid-century modern. So it does take on a life of its own. And there's a story behind it that is really pretty easy to sell if you're, in that marketplace. So, I keep up on as much as I can about everything going on in the Los Angeles area with architectural properties. And it's just amazing to me still how many houses come up and you walk into them and it's living art in my opinion. And I'm very blessed to live amongst it all.
When I was living in South Carolina, they had their historic designation homes. And so there was different, obviously with those to keep that designation and to keep the tax breaks, if there was any kind of remodeling or anything that needed to be done, it needed to fit within a certain framework. Is that the same thing going on?
We have our historic districts or our HPOZs, and essentially you cannot change the exterior facade of the house. It has to maintain the existing, or if it's had work done in the past that was illegal, then you have to bring it back to the original style. You have to bring everything back as much as you can. So anything you can see from the street has to look like it did when it was built.
Right. So how is that working with buyers of those homes, to make sure that, because, sometimes maybe they're not as educated on that?
Well, that's our job, is to educate them. as realtors. I was the chairperson for our historic preservation committee within our board of realtors, and I was teaching other realtors how to educate their clients. And it really is, our job because here we have a lot of people who want to tear down. So, and they don't realize that, foreign buyers especially, they don't realize how illegal that is. And so our job is to teach them that and to be spokespeople for the architecture.
Right. So for an agent that's looking to get into that space, what do you suggest they do to make sure that they are those teachers that are helping out and keep?
Well, we do a lot of, typically pre-COVID, we have a lot of home tours in the area. And one of the things that I did when I first came back to LA was I was a docent for those tours. You really have to become knowledgeable in the styles of architecture and teach yourself first. And then if you have a love for it, it will become second nature to be a spokesperson for it and to tell everybody they need to preserve versus, destroy.
Right.
And I think really just learning the inventory, like anything else, learning the inventory, learning the styles, learning about the architects, doing as much research as possible. And then it becomes kind of, second nature. You become friends with agents who are working in that same niche as you are, and you throw ideas off each other, and you just put yourself out there.
Right. And I think it's a really interesting niche. I can't imagine all the different, you go into a place and there's one little detail that, you may have never seen anywhere else. And
it's interesting. It's interesting. A number of years ago, I took a tour of a Victorian, and there's an architectural element called a coffin corner. Mm-hmm. So when you're coming down a steep staircase, if you see it's like a niche in the wall where the corner is of the staircase, I learned that that's called a coffin corner because back at the turn of the century, when they had someone pass away, they had them in the house for a number of days. Mm-hmm. And so when they were bringing the coffin down the stairs, they couldn't figure out how to get it down. So they had to, essentially dig out a hole to get the corner. And it makes perfect sense. It's a coffin corner, but you look at it on a stairwell, and if you have no knowledge of that architectural element, then you're like, what is that? Is it a place to put your trophies? I mean, what, and then to learn what it really is, and you think about how they lived at that time and how things have changed. It's just interesting from a historical perspective.
Right. And I think, the people that are looking to purchase a home like that, a lot of times they're also into the architectural and the story behind a place. I think that's also got to be a really a fun interaction.
It is. And another number of years ago, I had a client who we looked at every mid-century that came on the market from $1 million to $2 million for almost a year. And it really was fascinating. We still talk about certain houses that we saw at that point in time. And he ended up buying an amazing property. But I wasn't a big mid-century fan until that client. And now I'm a huge mid-century fan. So I can talk for days about architecture. I mean, you get me started, and I'm such an architecture geek that I don't stop. But when you find somebody who has that same interest and you connect, and it's like you can't stop talking about it. Right. So it is fascinating.
Right. Now, one of the other aspects you touched on was prefabs. I'm interested to hear your theory on that.
I love prefabs. I think certain ones. I think that people don't understand what a prefab is in today's modern world. They still think of it as a manufactured home. When you say prefab, they think of it as a manufactured home in a mobile home park. And the construction quality, the green aspect to prefab homes. I mean, I think that prefab should be the wave of the future because, we're using our natural resources at such a rapid pace. We're not going to have any left for my kids and my grandkids. So I really believe that prefab should become the wave of the building future. It's just interesting to me to see that Los Angeles hasn't jumped on the bandwagon as other countries have, other places in the world. The modern style of architecture of the prefabs is amazing. And, why shouldn't we save our resources at the same time?
Right.
They're cheaper to put up, not a lot cheaper, but they are cheaper to put up typically. They are erected so much faster than a typical stick built. And And you can make changes. You can modify the existing plans with most of the companies. They want to work with you. I just think that it's a resource that we're not utilizing here as we should be.
Yes. I think a lot of people, when they do think of the prefab, you think of the house going on down the highway, in split in two, going down, on the back of the semi.
Yeah.
But now because of the way things are made, these modular, these modules that things can be built, and you can create an art piece out of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been in some that I just thought, oh my gosh, $2.5 million prefabs. I mean, there was one listed. I actually didn't see it because it was just a schematic. It was just a plan, but it was a $5 million prefab in Los Feliz. And I just thought it was incredible looking. And I would pay if I had $5 million, I would pay it in a heartbeat. And it's also something that is unique as well. And it shows how far along we've come in building practices. I mean, I've always said that we don't build like we used to, because I've specialized in craftsman homes, that were built in 1910, and they've withstood the test of time. But I think these prefabs will also. And I think that it's interesting to me because even if people read Dwell magazine on a daily, on a monthly basis, they still don't get the prefab aspect. And I've always said, I wish I could spec one out and hold it open for 6 months and have everybody just come and see it and understand how really beautiful they are and how they aren't what you imagine.
Yeah. So other than doing something like that, what do you think it's going to take to get people to, their interest level in them?
I don't know. That's a tough call because we really only have like a handful of them here in the Los Angeles area. There's a couple of them in Santa Monica, Venice Beach. That's probably where the biggest number of them are right now. It's hard to say. I guess interviews like this maybe would pique somebody's, interest to find out more. But I've done some tours of some of the companies, like their manufacturing plants, and they're really done really well. And I hope that eventually it does take off.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the people have asked me, well, what about the earthquakes and the foundations? And well, they are built on foundation, and with the type of material they use, they are actually better than a stick built here for earthquakes, preparedness.
Right.
And they're safer, more efficient, energy consumption, material consumption. They're smart homes, most of them. So you run everything from a central hub within your house. And people want modern technology these days. So that's all packaged into one neat and tiny, bundle for people.
Yeah. So
I'm hoping, and I mean, I talk about it a lot, but I don't know how widespread that influence really is. So,
no, I like the idea. I think it's awesome. It's interesting. You talked about they don't build homes like they used to. And with your experience in the historic architecture, in South Carolina, we have an area called Pawleys Island. And it's some of the homes there, date back to, just post Civil War. There was one home, I think it's 1880s. It was one of the governors of South Carolina. It was his beach home. Mm-hmm. These are the only homes that have withstood, Hurricane Hugo and some of these, but you go underneath of them and you see why they've, withstood. The walls are, massive.
Well, and it's interesting too because John Lautner was so ahead of his time in terms of his designs, and you look at some of his designs and you think how have they withstood the test of time, let alone how was he able to do like Hemisphere, where he sunk a huge cement post into the ground, and it's like Hemisphere is like a spaceship, it's in the hills of Hollywood. And the lot was very small. And the whole reason he came up with the idea was because they couldn't figure out how to actually build a reasonably sized square footprint on this hillside. Mm. And you look now at his ideas, like you look at his plans and you think, how did he, without any modern technology, how did he design that to have it withstand the test of time and the earthquakes and the natural, occurrences? It's amazing to me how, without computers and without calculators and without anything that these architects could come up with the things that they did.
Yeah. And just wrapping up, I just want to ask you how you seem very passionate about this niche. How important is it to have a passion, to, especially for, in a business where sometimes it can feel like, there's a lot going on and you have all these different things you need to make sure of, but you're very passionate about the homes that you are working with.
I think this can be a very difficult, very challenging, just very hard business. I mean, you're a paid on commission only. It's extremely cutthroat competitive. Everybody knows 10 realtors, especially living here in LA. So I think if you don't have a passion for it, I'm also passionate about people and relationships and building. I build client relationships that, are last a lifetime. I mean, I'm my client's go-to person for anything house-based. And so if you don't have passion for it, I don't think that you will be able to withstand the trials and tribulations. As realtors, no matter what happens in a transaction, typically we are the ones who get the brunt of the frustration if something bad, if something goes wrong. And you really kind of have to build a tough skin and love it to stay in it, I think.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. This was,
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that we were able to make it work.
So I really want to thank Kate for joining me. I think it's awesome that she's been able to make a career based around this passion for these different home styles. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an awesome story or tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and I'll see you on the next episode.